Hi there on this Friday afternoon. Pastor Gary is away this week, and so he's enjoying some downtime. Next week, I will not be here. We're doing a lot of staycations these days. And as always, thanks to those of you who registered for Sunday to worship. If you watch online, we're grateful to the Lord for how many of you, I know you've been encouraged and strengthened by grace just in these days. Luke, you and I wanted to talk today. We've only chatted briefly today, but we wanted to talk a little bit about being in the image of God, especially in light of a pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about Genesis 1, since we've been going through the creation account, where God says that he created them, male and female, in his image. And there's just this sense of the importance of us understanding what does it mean to be made in the image of God. Now, I know when I preached, I talk about being God's representatives here on earth, but from your perspective, understanding the Bible, how would you what kind of things would you add when we want to define what the image of God is?
Yeah, certainly. It's hard to come up with all of it in one sermon in a short amount of time. I think one of the things that is maybe most relevant in this pandemic right now is that being in the image of God means that people are inherently social. They're inherently relational. Even in the first chapters of Genesis, as we read them, we see God speaking in the plural. Let us. Even before creation, even for all eternity, God is the Trinity. God has been triune, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and has been relational. And human beings in his image are relational as well. And they naturally are made to connect and be in fellowship and communion with one another. And that's been hard during this pandemic. It's been hard to make those connections. And maybe some people more than others. We have introverts and we have extroverts. But at some level, everybody has felt this tightening and this restricting of that social element of who we are.
Yeah, and it's a good point to talk about how God has been triune, because in being a triune God, there's never been any lack in himself, that there's perfect fellowship and harmony, and so he creates out of the overflow of who he is. So in that sense, God is not like us, and we are not like him in that sense. But it seems like there's a fair bit about the image of God that also suggests that um, being made in his image, we're to reflect certain attributes. And so I know sometimes people have talked about communicable and incommunicable attributes. I'm putting you on the spot here because we haven't chatted about these, but uh, how would you maybe clarify the difference between communicable and incommunicable attributes?
Right, yeah, certainly. There are some attributes of God, incommunicable ones. It's going to be fun to say a whole bunch of times here. Are aspects of who God is that we don't have any piece of, really. God is all powerful. He is all knowing. He is omnipresent. Those are things that no human being can be, has ever been. There are other elements of God, his justice, his creativity, those types of attributes that in some way, imperfectly, we as people in his image do share and do reflect.
Yeah, and that's part of us just having dominion in creation, is to reflect these communicable attributes of God. But in light of the fact that we're in a global pandemic, we can sometimes feel the weight of sin and the effects of the curse more than we can feel like we're being able to reflect who God is. So um, you mentioned that God is triune, relational, and so I know a lot of people are experiencing challenges at this time. Even today, we're hearing in the news. This is some of what I do on a weekly basis. Is I sometimes will catch key press conferences that the premier holds, just to kind of get wind as to what's coming down in terms of provincial directions for us. And even today, the province is talking about tightening up social circles
Yeah.
and things like that. And so we weren't made as human beings to be restricting our social circles. We are inherently social beings, even if
Yeah.
you're, as you said, introvert or extrovert. So maybe we can take a little bit of time here today and think about, as social circles, we're being told to have social circles narrow. Um, how can we think about that in light of being made in the image of God? Where do you want to start with that, Luke?
Yeah. I could think of a few things. I think the first is that this recommendation from the government to tighten social circles means that the people we're going to be in contact with the most are those in our household. That's what we're being encouraged to do, is to limit that closeness to the household. And I think kind of maybe the first and kind of most foundational place to start is the family. This is, even as we aren't able to carry on our social connections and relationships as we've been able to, for those of us who live with family, there is an opportunity to cultivate a closeness and a relationship with those we live with and are with on a daily basis that we may not otherwise get, especially in a season where we may be working from home, or work may be restricted or not
Mm-hmm.
happening at all in certain cases. I think foundationally we have the opportunity to invest in our families and to love them in a unique way.
Yeah, that's a great point. The second part that I automatically think of is in terms of our relationship to government. I know that in the early days of this pandemic, there were questions like, as new information became available, were churches being was this a soft persecution of Christians? And
Mm-hmm.
I think we've seen over the last several months that our government has been willing to allow us to meet. They've restricted gatherings like at restaurants or bars. They've seen that where there are problems where people are gathering and not respecting the guidelines of the province, they'll cut those back. Churches remain open, and we're incredibly grateful.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be suggesting that we're defying authority. That,
Mm-hmm.
like as Paul says in Romans 13, you should think long and hard about if you're going to disobey the authorities over you.
Yeah.
So definitely there's that element. So we want to respect the authority over us. We want to grow in our relationships with families. But I know, Luke, like, we're here as a staff, we're pretty careful around here in terms of how we're interacting. At times we've worn masks in the office based on other circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty open with one another. If someone in our social bubble has had, if they've gone through screening and they haven't cleared it, we've been very careful about that to protect one another and to protect the church. But it's going to get tough for people. I'm thinking we're entering into winter.
Yeah.
I'm hearing words like El Nina or La Nina, which is a colder, wetter winter. So what can we do to be engaging as people made in the image of God, intended to have relationships? We need fellowship with one another. How can we be doing that when our social circles maybe are feeling like they're shrinking and it's tighter, and we want to love and serve and protect others?
Yeah. I think for sure, if the last 6 months has taught us anything, some creativity will be required on that. And I think maybe the best place to start is with technology. Many of us are now familiar with Zoom and FaceTime and all of these things that we weren't quite as familiar with before. And I think especially moving into winter, more indoors, and even more concern about cold and flu and everything else going on. We're going to want to take those newly found skills and use them, and to use them in an intentional way to reach out to those we love, and maybe reach out to those who really need it. I think that's a great place to start anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've Melanie and I have also been just trying to think creatively as well. I know patio heaters. They've been snapped up by outdoor restaurants. They're trying to keep their patios open as long as they can. Um, and so like we've seen that there've been all sorts of rushes on various products like wood for decks, heaters, a lot of outdoor living equipment.
Mhm.
Probably in the winter, we're going to see a rush on various other items like snowshoes, skis, for example.
Yeah.
One of the things that Melanie and I've talked about is just there's a Norwegian saying that goes, it's there's never bad weather, just bad clothing.
Mm.
And so we've been thinking about just to encourage you. One way that you can socialize in a pandemic is you can continue to be outside. Now I know about lots of people that are just I don't like the cold weather,
Yeah.
but I think it's good. I'm a northerner, right? So I grew up in northwestern Ontario. I've got that. It is cold here. I find the humidity just chills me to the bones. But if there's no bad weather, just bad clothing, then I think it's good to think about, well, what can we do outside?
Yeah.
So getting creative with things like that. Other
Absolutely.
things that you think about, Luke?
Hmm. Definitely, my brain was going to a very similar place as far as being outside, finding creative ways outdoors to spend time with others. I think many of us have been involved with things like, patio visits and things like that. The recommendation from the government to maintain your or to keep your social circles in your household really has to do with being close. But if you're able to find ways to sit outside or to be outside or to go for a walk and outdoors with lots and lots of distance, there's still ways to do that. And so yeah, this may be a winter where maybe some of us get more comfortable with winter weather than we had used to be, because that'll be a great way to be able to see people and spend time together.
Yeah, so I think that'll mean some practical things for people like Halloween.
Mm.
You don't want hundreds of kids coming to your door and ringing doorbells
Yeah.
and handing out candy. So thinking creatively about how can you bless, maybe it's going to your neighbor's place and doing a porch drop off with a bag of goodies for the kids that you know in your kind of immediate neighborhood there. I think of at Christmas. It won't be that long, believe it or not.
Yeah.
We're going to be in about 8 weeks into the Advent season, and that's a great time to be doing things like carol singing. Get a couple of families together, go in your own vehicle, go to people from the church, go to some of the seniors' places, and you can ring the doorbell. You can stand back in your social bubble. You can sing to one another. Luke, during the first lockdown, maybe there were some things that you and Laura did to encourage and bless people, to get creative when the social circles were tight. What kind of things did you do?
Yeah, so we both did and received one particular thing, which was food and baking, and we were the recipient of many wonderful baked goods and things like that, just dropped off at the door, ready to eat, which was wonderful. And we had the opportunity as well to share some food, and just you can drop off a meal on someone's porch and bless them that way. And that is a wonderful way, if you like to cook or if you want to learn to cook, now is a great time. That's a really practical way to show someone love and to bless them.
So I know as people made in the image of God, as we think about that relational dynamic, maybe you've got ideas, and we haven't mentioned things. We're talking a little bit off of the top of our heads here today. You can leave a comment below
Yeah.
on Facebook or on YouTube. You can always comment there, and it's always helpful. We want to spur one another on in love and good deeds, and so we want to find ways to be blessing one another. I know, Luke, one of the things that I've been encouraged by our church is how people, for the most part, have been able to maintain a positive and encouraging attitude towards one another. I know some churches are
Mm.
facing a lot of turmoil. There's political
Yeah.
divisions. There's questions about the legitimacy or illegitimacy of government policies. As a church, I think for the most part, we've hung together.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, in terms of being made in the image of God, that the oneness of God. He's a triune God, but yet one. So how can we continue to maintain that unity that we've received in the Spirit, and not cause division in the body?
Yeah, I think the first thing that is foundationally important is that we ought to continue to pray as we've been praying, because that unity ultimately is a work of the Spirit, and the Spirit working through His Word in the life of His church. And so, for those of us who have been praying for that, to continue to pray for that is going to be key, and to continue to ask for more people to be praying for that, because that's a supernatural work. That is not a work that can be done on our own as a church. I think as well, just being mindful of what Scripture says about unity and about giving preference to others and all of those things. If we have that on our mind, if we're very careful to remember those things and to be reminding ourselves constantly of them, I think that will help a lot.
Yeah, we don't beat this drum of unity a lot here. We
Mm-hmm.
we try to center ourselves around, we're united in Jesus Christ, and we try to come back to the main things. But I do think that this is a time for us to be mindful of one another. And I just want to express thanks. I know there's a few people who watch here. We just want to express thanks for how you are eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace, as Paul says in Ephesians 4. I think we can be phoning, texting one another. We can uh, drop off a gift for someone that we're thinking about. There are lots of ways to do this. Um, just in the last couple of minutes, Luke, is we're looking ahead to Sunday. I'm looking at this empty auditorium. We've tried to set it up for Sunday. If someone were thinking about coming, maybe it's for the first time that they're coming out. Um, what could you tell them to expect here on a Sunday morning?
For sure. You can expect that we have thought long and hard about how to run a Sunday morning service in a safe way. We have our chairs in our auditorium spaced out in a way that is well distanced, and even technically a little bit more than they need to be. We're being very careful with screening everybody who comes in. We're being very careful to have things clean in between services. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, a lot of people volunteering their time to keep things as safe as possible, and we're assigning seats. We're all wearing masks. It's impossible to have no risk, but we're doing everything we can, and as much as we can think to keep that risk as low as we possibly can.
Yeah, and if I think about how necessary it is as creatures to be in relationship with one another, the better we are at screening and protecting, the better we will be able to serve one another and maintain this opportunity that we have together. We don't want to have a COVID situation in within the church where we're infecting one another. So we're very mindful of being brutally honest in screening, being mindful that if you do screen, one of the things that we'll have now is as you register on a Sunday, we'll just mention to you that our parish nurse, Kathy Nellam, will follow up with you if there are any questions that come in the screening process, because we recognize how valuable what we do here on a Sunday morning is in worship to God and in encouraging to one another. So just be mindful of that, to encourage you in that. As you come to this weekend, and as you look forward to what God has for you in the ministry of His Word, we'll be looking at the story of Noah this weekend. And there's a lot of material there that I'm going to try and cover. And we're really eager to see how God brings His salvation in the midst of an evil world. And so we'll look forward to seeing you on Sunday. So thanks for joining us on this Friday edition of Table Talk. If you need to register and you didn't do that, send me an email, and I'll be glad to sort that out with you and make sure that we get you registered for Sunday. Hope you have a great weekend, and we hope to see you Sunday. If not, leave a comment in the leave the comment when you're watching on Sunday. We'll be glad to worship with you. So God bless you. Have a great weekend.
Bye.